You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارستايجر
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And Duane, I've been wondering, we didn't do a show on Thursday because I needed to work on some technical side. We had some scheduling problems, and it was Thursday just after the international break. Surely the greatest player of all time of this league is not coming back to play, right? That's not going to happen on a day we're not having a show.
Well, no, and also some news on Canadian Premier League, and a lot of things sort of happened in the day that we're not going to have a show. But we're here today, though, so that's what matters, right?
Well, soccer today, so we're here today. It's always today, so today we have a show today.
Exactly. We're going to talk with Landon in the third block, but you had a chance to talk to someone this week, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, at Satsuputta, Wednesday was, first of all, very interesting game between Montreal Impact and Orlando. Orlando City for Montreal won. But during that game, we had Don Garber, commissioner of the MLS, Major League Soccer, was present for the game, visited the infrastructures, Centre du Trilet yesterday and other places. But at the game, he was there, made it in a press conference, a scrum at halftime. No, there was no All-Star game announcement. But we'll talk about this after maybe. So, Duane, let's just go right now. Listen to Don Garber.
My apologies for not being able to speak French. So fire away in English.
Well, first of all, we can't escape it. What is the league's view on the officiating? It's been quite problematic, I'd say, so far this season.
Well, officiating our sport's imperfect, and I think everybody knows that. We are the only league, along with the Premier League, that has an organization that is working to make it better, that the league is involved in, partnership with the CSA and U.S. Soccer. So assessment and training and evaluation is all pretty new. It's only a couple of years old, with a leading league with a handful in Europe to work on video review. So the best thing that I could say is we all want to see perfection with officiating, and it's an imperfect process. So all we can do is try to get better, and then to the extent that we'll be able to use technology to ensure that we can correct when an official makes a mistake. Yeah, I heard about that, and I didn't know about it until I came up here. We've made a commitment to Montreal and Vancouver that we will bring an All-Star game up to each of these cities, but the teams are going to do it when they think it's right for them. Here in Montreal, there's a lot more work they're trying to do with the city, with the corporate community, even with their fans, to make this team more popular. And when Joey and his staff are ready to do it, we'll be the first ones that will work with them to make it happen. I will say next year on the 375, we're looking to do something with the Impact to get our league involved in the celebration, because I know it's an important moment for the city and for the country.
What do you have in mind?
Maybe there's something with an international club. We're going to work with the Impact to figure that out, but we will do something on the 375th.
Well, it's great to have a player like Kaka and the designated players here. When you have a guy who's making more money individually than what half the teams in the league, is there a concern about how that impacts other teams as far as a competitive level?
Well, and I think if you look at the game here today, you've got two teams with very high-priced players, and both of them are fighting for playoff spots. So I don't think that there is a competitive imbalance with the designated player. We've seen that just by tracking the data. We're going to continue to work on a system that ensures that every team at the beginning of the year has an opportunity for their fans to believe they could win. The smart are going to do better than those who make bad decisions. And we have a unique system that can allow that to happen. So I actually feel pretty good about our competitive balance. And you look at our track record over the last 20 years, it's proven to be so.
Don, with international windows still affecting teams having to lose their best players despite the small breaks that you've implemented, are there any other changes coming?
It's not perfect, right? We were all watching the Canada game and watching the Mexico-Honduras game, and now we have a big game here in Montreal. I'm actually quite pleased with the crowd. So we all, as you know, particularly up here, have challenges playing games at times of the year when the rest of the world is playing. I think we need to continue to jam it all into the best possible competitive format. We've taken more and more of the FIFA windows off as breaks, and I think you'll see more of that in the years to come.
We're coming close to
receive any complaints about the clubs considering the traveling with the planes that are not chartered? Is it something you want to improve throughout the
So, listen, everything with us is about what do we need to do to get better? How do we raise the quality of play? How do we invest more in our academies? And here they've got nearly $20 million invested in a facility and have academy teams to U8, right? So everything has got to go into the pot. You got to make your decisions. So our teams have got to decide whether or not charter travel is a bigger priority than perhaps investing in the academy programs to make the Canadian player better. And all of that has got to get squeezed into an affordable budget so that we could continue to succeed as a league. I will say charter travel is less of a priority than investing in academy programs.
As a traveler around the league, what impresses you most from your stadium?
Enormously passionate fan base. I think this is a great stadium. It's perfectly sized. We're on a Wednesday night, 17,000 people are here. But mostly it's this. This is a soccer country. This is a soccer city. And I travel around now 20 markets, soon to be 24, and I don't have a scrum with 50 reporters here. So this is it's a great market for Major League Soccer, and Joey's doing a good job.
Sorry, speaking of a Canada country soccer, it's been 10 years. We have almost 10 years Canadian soccer teams. What can MLS do more to help the Canadian soccer team as a whole? So things like last night go further.
Sure. So, I'll say 10 years is actually a short time. Look at, you got the World Cup of hockey going on. You guys know how long the NHL has been around. We've only been here since 2007, right? And in this market, in Vancouver, 11 and 12. So a very short period of time that we have academy programs and development programs that are going to help from a professional investment perspective support what the CSA has been doing for many, many years. It's heartbreaking to see what happened last night. I said this in my opening press conference in late 2006. Until Canada qualifies for the World Cup, I will not consider that me as commissioner, or myself as commissioner, have completed the job. So my fingers were crossed to at least get into the Hex, and we're going to have to wait 4 more years. So we're working closely with the CSA. For all of you who don't know, Victor's a great leader. Peter's doing a good job. We're working more closely with them than ever before. We've got a number of different programs that we've been working on for the last year. Before the end of the year, I expect Victor and the League and Peter be able to announce some of those initiatives. The League needs to do more to help grow the game here, but we need to have a closer partnership with the CSA, like the partnership we've had for the last 20 years with U.S. Soccer. That's just going to take time and a little bit of growing up together.
Don Forbes released a list of MLS team valuations today, and it showed that the average valuation is up 80% from 2013. What do you think when you see those numbers?
Listen, I wish that those numbers were about profitability and not necessarily about value or perceived value. I think it shows that this is a league on the rise. From an investment perspective, it's good to be long on Major League Soccer. It's a good investment in professional sports. But most importantly, in the U.S. and in Canada, this is really the last professional sports league that still has its greatest amount of growth in front of it. So we still have not been able to capture the massive opportunity that exists in Canada and the United States with all the soccer fans here who have not yet converted to MLS fans. And when we close that gap, then you're really going to see the value proposition change dramatically. And I think with real support.
All right. We're back on Soccer Today. Thanks to Don Garber and Dan Courtemanche for this press conference of Don Garber. Duane, what do you think about the Don Garber scrum?
Well, he does say a lot without saying much sometimes, of course. I did find something interesting in a couple of those things. Obviously, we talked about the All-Star game on Wednesday, and at that point in time, the reports were out there that it was going to come to Montreal. If I was reading that carefully, it does sound like he shot that down pretty thoroughly there and suggested that perhaps the Impact ownership has indicated to him that they aren't ready to have it, which is a bit surprising to me. But nonetheless, that's
on that subject, when he mentioned 375 off the top of his head, the fact that he mentioned maybe with an international team something, he actually is aware though. So maybe the All-Star game is not what's going to happen. It could be, and like I said in After Woodworks yesterday, it might still be the case. Maybe things are not finalized, and it might be 2017 the All-Star game in Montreal, because look at when the Habs were 100 years old, they had the All-Star game. League in North America tend to usually celebrate important dates with an All-Star game, so it would kind of fit that mold. But just the fact that he knew it off the top of his head and was able to speak about it tells me that there's something in the works, at least.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the thing about Mr. Garber, is that he is a very polished modern commissioner, in the sense that he's going to lie until the moment he doesn't have to lie. And that's a very harsh way to put it, but if in fact it's like 98% done and that 2% isn't quite yet there, he's still going to say it's not there, because in his mind that's true. He's not going to give any hints at, in case they have to change gears and all that sort of stuff. They're very protective modern commissioners when they talk about things like that. They're not very candid, is what I'm saying.
Let's go to the question that I asked him, Wayne. About 10 years, almost 10 years of Major League Soccer in Canada. What can he do better to help Canadian soccer as the Canadian men's national team level?
Well, if I had any hair, I'd pull it out when they answer questions like that, because it's a lot of rhetoric. Although, obviously there's a very simple solution that a lot of us have been advocating for. Well, I think the first time that I brought up Canadians as domestics was definitely in the It's Called Football days. I suspect there was probably a 0 as the third number in the year when I first mentioned it. So this is not a new idea. It's an idea that has frustrated us up here since basically a couple years into TFC, when we realized that there needed to be changes in how the quotas were determined. And then certainly when the Whitecaps came in and negotiated the Canadian quota and the Canadian clubs down to 3, that made the problem even worse. There's now only the 9 spots. So that's obviously the first thing I'd say there. Although I did find what was interesting about that statement there, and it was the very end with what he said, how Victor and Peter might be able to make some announcements near the end of the year in terms of how MLS is going to work with the Canadian system to sort of improve its standing in the world, that they might be able to make those announcements. It got me thinking about whether or not
I know where you're going.
Well, whether or not CSA might be involved more. Obviously, the Canadians as domestic is the first thing most people think of, but I also wondered whether they might actually be involved in the Canadian Premier League talk.
Exactly. When you mentioned announcement and the timing of it, and before the end of the year and what happened yesterday, it kind of all blended in my mind and be like, maybe it's not a project that MLS is against after all.
Yeah, and look, there's some sensibility to that, and right, even from a marketing perspective, right? That if you start the Canadian Premier League and you start that off the hop, you're going to have some credibility issues in certain markets. There's no doubt about that. I think we'd be delusional if we didn't acknowledge that. But if you create Major League Soccer Canada, which isn't the branding that we've assumed it's going to be, but if they created Major League Soccer Canada right off the top, you have an advantage over any other label that's out there. And some people that are listening to this might not like that, but the reality is it's true. And look, and if you're an NASL fan listening to this out now, you'll understand. You might resent it, but you'll understand that it is true, that MLS branding does actually legitimize you in the market. So if the Fury were playing in Major League Soccer Canada rather than in the NASL, which you have to explain to a new fan what it even is, then they're going to understand that, and it might actually make it easier for those clubs. So that's just what popped in my mind there, Kevin. It's quarter after, so why don't we take the quick break and then change gears and talk about some of that stuff that came out yesterday with the Canadian Premier League and Anthony and all that sort of stuff, Kevin.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And it's Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee here, as always, joined by Duane Rollins. Duane, yesterday, on top of Landon Donovan and talking to Garber on Wednesday night, Thursday was maybe a day to remember in the history or the unhistory of the Premier League in Canada, the Canadian Premier League. A lot of rumors surfaced yesterday.
Yeah, Anthony Teixeira, who has been on the show before, who I've been on his show many times before. I think, Kevin, you've probably been on his show too. I'm not sure, but anyway.
I think I have been, yes. Red Card Radio with Anthony Teixeira.
Red Card Radio, yeah. He made an announcement on Twitter at about 2:00 in the afternoon yesterday, Eastern Standard Time, that it was boom. My sources have confirmed that the first phase of planning in the Canadian Premier League is done, and that it's a go for 2018. So he gave specific date out there. That is the latest point in my original report. If I go way back to my very first reports on the Canadian Premier League, it was always going to be 2017 or 2018. So the 2018 timeline makes a lot of sense. Now, when that came out, I know Anthony, working with Anthony quite closely in Ligue 1. Talked to Anthony quite a bit. So, it's not, I trust Anthony. I also have other people that were in my ear yesterday that were telling me to pump the brakes a little bit, to use a phrase, to sort of back off, and that they were sort of telling me that there was nothing official that had been determined yesterday. It was just that Anthony had heard something that led him to believe that this was ready to go for 2018. Now, since that time has happened, if I could pass this forward, an additional conversation through someone who I trust very much, and I hate to use the anonymous, but you have to in this case because you're not going to get any information otherwise, but someone who I trust very much, and I'll tell you this, it's the person who gave me the information that the Portland Timbers and the Vancouver Whitecaps were getting named to MLS teams back when I broke that story back in 2011 or 2010, I guess it would have been when I broke it. So this is a person who's given me some very solid information at the highest levels before, confirmed to me that Anthony's story was closer to truth than it was to overreaction. So the way it was put to me is it's not official yet. There has not been a vote, but basically all of the work that had to happen internally has been sort of has reached a conclusion, and that there's been a lot of hard work to get the trust of everyone in the system from coast to coast to believe in this project, and that right now, the way I've been led to understand is that work is essentially done.
Duane,
and that they're ready to. Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
I'm not a big fan of math, but let's try to put 2 and 2 together here right now. DeVos was named in a new role in the CSA a few weeks ago. There's the debacle of the World Cup qualifying process for 2018. There's the weird comments that Don Garber made about maybe potential announcement by Vic and Peter before the end of the year. All those things together maybe are the perfect storm for the Premier League to be born. You're not going to have the argument of wanting to have more Canadian players to such a level as right now. DeVos has been open about that situation, about having opportunities, about player. He does have a great reputation in Major League Soccer, having worked in this league as a commentator and a play-by-color commentator for a long time. So, all those things combined kind of maybe can be hopeful now. I don't know. What do you think?
Look, I mean, I believe that this was going to happen since I initially reported it, because the information I'm getting from multiple places is that it will. However, I've always maintained like a 5 to 10% cynical nature to me that it would fall apart, and that's essentially what would happen. It wasn't that people aren't giving me sincere information right now on what's happening. It's that things can change and maybe the house of cards falls, so to speak, right? I based on what I've heard in the last couple of days, it sounds to me like the house of cards is not going to fall. And in fact, they are going to move forward. In fact, to finish the conversation I had this morning, I was basically told that where they're at now is that there's still an ownership vetting process that needs to happen before they can make any formal announcements. They don't want to make the announcement for the league until they have owners to put out there as well. Because one of the things that they're going to need to do at the very beginning is to establish trust by saying, this is the money. And it's that crass, really. Like, you need to have people that people understand have lots of coin that are willing to stand up there on a stage and go, yes, I'm going to lose money for 5 years on this. And
what's the
my
saying?
hope is
You do not have a second chance to make a first impression. And in your first impression, your first press conference, you don't have the perception of a top league or of at least at the level of a CFL. You know what I mean? With the type of owners to that level, to a first type of tier league in this country, you need to have that perception in your first press conference, and you kind of need to have owners with that type of backing to have that credibility. Because if you miss that first impression, everybody's going to think, it's just a small league with not a lot of teams. You need that first impression to go well.
Yeah, if they show up at a press conference and there's Vic and Peter and maybe some Pinties or somebody like some corporate sponsor there, and like 2 owners you never heard of, 3 blank chairs and whatever. And they go, we're still looking for the Toronto owner, and we'd ideally like to launch a team in Quebec, but we haven't found one there yet. But we got this guy from Regina that owns a used car lot. That's people are going to just roll their eyes and move on from it, right?
You illustrated what I was trying to say in nicer words.
Yeah, but if they go up there and they have, True North standing there saying, we're going to have Winnipeg's franchise, and you have the Calgary sports people there, that own the Flames and that, and going, yep, we're going to have the Calgary Flames Soccer Club is going to play here, and this is our plan to build a new stadium that we're going to share with the Stampeders. And you have, whoever, some wealthy guy in Toronto and some wealthy guy here, and you have all the regions set, and you can say these are our owners, and this is the money they have, because you can see it there. It's public domain stuff, and this is how this league's going to work. Then people are going to take note. And again, if Major League Soccer, and this is speculation at this point because I haven't heard anything to do with this, but just based on what Garber said there, if there's even if Major League Soccer is there in support of the idea,
even if you just don't oppose it.
Yeah, if they make an announcement, we welcome this. I think this is great for the Canadian system. That would, I think, reassure a lot of people that there's still a fear that they're trying to steal. Like, there is this people out there that think they're trying to steal their fandom away, that they're going to tear TFC and the Impact and the Whitecaps out of this league and force them into to what they view as a substandard league. And you certainly hear Fury and Eddie fans say the same thing. Although
that's a different level. Maybe in Ottawa there's things happening that we don't know, but that we know, but we don't know. You know what I mean? But if you're looking at the MLS teams like this, I always have like the grandfather rule. You know what I mean? Like in the Cardiffs of this world, and that they're already in the other league. So why would they they're not obligated to be in the new one?
Yeah. And I think I've been pretty clear with this, but people still don't hear it, right? Is that the grandfather, if you're in an existing American league, they're not going to force you out. They might encourage you to go out if you're in the NASL, because, to me, the NASL right now is ripe for getting out of, but that's another debate for another day, which we've had many times before. So I don't know why you'd want to stay in that league, especially when you factor in the amount of travel that it would require and so on and so forth, that, for an Edmonton or an Ottawa moving into a Canadian Premier League, if the level is relatively the same, and I don't know, I think it will be. I know people don't believe that. I think people just don't believe we're capable of creating something at a higher level, but that's self-hate and self-doubt and all that sort of jazz that makes me crazy about Canadian soccer.
Duane, it takes a special people to imagine something and put it to fruition. Not everybody can imagine this, and not everybody can do this. So I can understand, but when I look at what the possibilities are with this Canadian Premier League, just the amount of Canadian playing compared to now, it's in the level of, let's face it, 8 teams, 10 teams, 23-man roster. That's 200 Canadian potentially having a professional soccer job, Duane. At the best case scenario, but yeah, that's the amount of players. That's a game changer right here.
Oh, for sure. And it's I think maybe why the bailing out of World Cup qualifying this time didn't hit me at the same level as it does in other cycles, is because I just recognized that this cycle was just completely, like, it was just a cycle that's based on failures of the past. And if we'd done anything in it, it would have been fortune as much as anything else. I mean, we're like roaming the fields of Scotland looking for wingers, right? That's where we're at in this program right now. Like, we need to find people that have precarious connections to Canada just to be competitive. I mean, I talked to someone in the world, high up in Canadian soccer, immediately following the elimination of Canada, and they said that we have 1.5 international quality players on our roster. right? We need to create more, and that's the bottom line. And it's not that, we got to be careful how you say that, because it's not like the league is developing players, because it's not. It's a finishing school. It's not where you develop them. You're still going to have to develop them in the academies. You're still going to have to work at the grassroots. Jason DeVos is still going to have to do his work there, but you still have to have a place for them to, like I said, it's finishing school. You have to have a place for them to go before they're ready to move on to bigger leagues, and some of them won't be. And I think some of them will just have nice careers in the Canadian Premier League.
If you use a CFL model for that, where the average salary or the medium salary is around 45, 50,000, depending on the players and the teams, but you have this, you play your sport that you love, you play at a professional level, there's nothing to be ashamed of having a professional level at that professional career at that level. And so there's that aspect that's not necessarily possible now, maybe with USL, but outside of that, it's not possible. That will be now.
Yeah, well, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think that that's an understated value of Major League Soccer to the American system. Is that I use the Chad Barrett example, that we're going to create a Canadian Chad Barrett by having a Canadian Premier League. And he's not going to necessarily directly make an impact on the national team level, because he might not quite be there. But what he does is he helps solidify an infrastructure that in turn can create players that are a higher level, that in turn can create more of a fandom for the sport, that in turn can create a culture of people that are on the ground cheering for the sport, wanting the sport to get better, and forcing changes at the grassroots that in turn creates those players that are international caliber. Those Chad Barretts of the world matter to the American system, because without them, they don't have that base that does create the top, right? Without the base, you can't have the pinnacle. This just doesn't happen, right? You try and create it from the top down, it's never going to work. You need to create that solid bottom first, and that's all of those players that create a league that can ultimately fish out and find those great players that can drive your international caliber player level up, so that we don't have conversations following bailing out of World Cup qualifying where we're arguing whether it's 1.5 or 2 or maybe 3 players that are of international quality, with the rest filling a role. By the way, the one was Steve Hutchison, and the half was Borean. That was that was a conversation.
Yeah, that's funny. But just want to finish this blog, Duane, by going back to Garber's comments. And he mentioned that 10 years is a short amount of time it's not even 10 years, but it's getting close to it. And a short amount of time for a league to help a country develop players. If you want to look at Major League Soccer as a whole, since 20 years for the U.S., was it beneficial? And did you see the correlation between the presence of Major League Soccer and where the United States as a country is at the level of international soccer?
He's right and he's wrong. He's right in the sense that 10 years is a blink of the eye, but you can, in CONCACAF, turn a country with that. If you go back to where Canada was 10 years ago too, had they stuck with the original plan of the quota levels at TSC.
We're at the same place as we are today, aren't we? Weren't we?
Pardon me?
We were at the same place that we were, we're now and 10 years ago. Isn't it the same? Like, we didn't qualify.
Yeah, 10 years ago we were closer.
Well, that's what I mean. I was like, maybe it was better 10 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago it certainly was. We're absolutely a Hex team 20 years ago. Well, 19 years ago we were in the Hex. So, there's no even argument about that. We were actually playing in the Hex 20 years ago, not doing very well, but nonetheless, it was the evolution from that point forward is where we lost the plot a little bit. And it had as much to do with grassroots failings as it has to do with league failings. But I do maintain that if you had, instead of 9 guaranteed spots in Major League Soccer, if you had 24, which is what it would have been if you would have stuck with the original quota, we'd be slightly better. We might be Hex better by now. That's kind of a subjective opinion that I have. You can't really back that up, but you do need a greater base than just 3 teams. That's the bottom line too, which is where the Premier League talk comes back in. So I do hope that at the very least, there's a supportive role for Major League Soccer in this, because I think that that's ultimately what's going to be best for this. And I know there are people listening to this that don't like Major League Soccer for all of the reasons that we talk about all of the time here. And I don't like aspects of Major League Soccer either. However, you cannot ignore that what it has done in the United States is create a financial stability that has allowed the game to thrive. And if you don't believe that is important, then you're new. And that's what frustrates those of us that aren't new, is that people that are just screaming to tear the whole system down aren't really thinking long-term and aren't really thinking of what the consequences of that will be. Are we ready yet to completely tear things down in the States? I don't think we are. We're ready to start tearing it down a little bit, and I get frustrated by the lack of progress. But nonetheless, I don't think we're ready to tear it completely down. And let's just say this as bluntly as I can right now, Kevin. There will not be promotion and relegation in the Canadian Premier League. That's not going to happen, folks.
Yes. All right. Let's take a break and come back and talk about Landy Cakes. You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, Open Lines After Dark, 5 Rings Daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane, yesterday, I don't know if this caught you as much of a surprise as it caught me, but Landon Donovan is back.
Yeah, look, it's funny because I had tweeted out because I had caught wind. I'd been told before about the Premier League stuff, but I was also told not to tell exactly what the news was. So I just put a tease out there that there was major news coming down, and then almost instantly, Donovan announcement starts to leak, and people are all like, "Oh, is that the news you're breaking?" And I'm like, I don't know how to answer this. No, but anyway, so that wasn't the news I was breaking, but certainly it caught me off guard for sure. Didn't catch me off guard that he's coming out of retirement, because I think I've had conversations on this show before where I've indicated that I thought he would come out of retirement at some point. I said that the day he retired that I thought he would come out of retirement at some point, which is why it was a little silly that they renamed the MVP award after him so quickly.
Yeah, wait a little bit. Like, wait 3-4 years. He'll be fine. He'll still be young then. And no, but that's true. And then Donovan has a player always like to have some time off and enjoy the benefits of being a professional athlete, being in shape, being good looking, having money, being able to enjoy off season. So he liked his time off. This time around, what interests me though is his Facebook post yesterday, late last night, where he explained why. And it started as a joke, like 3 weeks, a month ago, something in that timeline, where it was just there and he was commenting on a game. And after the game was talking to people from the Galaxy staff, and they were like, everybody was getting injured and De Jong just left and Sardis done for the season. And they're like, so Landon, when are you coming back now? And he says a joke, well, I haven't played a meaningful game in 2 years and not in shape. And then the process starting in his mind, well, the Galaxy are in trouble. They're going to start losing game if something doesn't change because of injuries and players leaving. And I can come back and help this team. And he started talking with Arena, and Bruce Arena would say, if this happens, I'll only use you in a way that will benefit the team, will benefit you. We're not going to put you in a situation that you look bad. So they started talking. The process goes further and further, and goes back to yesterday where he announces his return. Number 26 for the LA Galaxy, Landon Donovan, in a maybe sub or help type of role, but he's back.
Yeah. Well, that's the, where we go from here. Obviously, look, we being in Canada, we talk about the American issues all the time. Of course, we understand them, but we being in Canada, we have a bit of a detached view of this, more than I think a lot of Americans, who basically the reaction to this news yesterday was wee, kind of basically, right? There wasn't a lot of critical thought based on it. It was just kind of, it's great that Landon's back and we're happy to see him back because he was one of my favorite players. But I think that I kind of looked at it and said, okay, well, this is interesting. And as I said, I always thought that he probably wasn't quite done yet. But I do wonder, in the way that he's coming back right now, I always assumed he would come back at the start of the season, that he would announce at the end of a year. And I assumed it might be for LA too, although that might be too far away. And that could be probably why this was going to either happen now or not happen. But that he would have several months to get in playing shape for him, because this is my my takeaway on this is exactly that, is like, what kind of role can we expect this guy 2 years out of the game? I don't care how good he was when he left. 2 years out of the game, what kind of role can you reasonably expect him to step into? I know there were people out there yesterday, Kevin, that were saying, oh, he's eating Cheetos and cold pizza. I think Maxie wrote that out there on his Twitter feed, if I'm stealing that. But he's still going to be the 5th best midfielder in the league. I don't necessarily agree with that.
Well, Maxie likes his sarcasm, but he's not. He's in pretty good shape. In the video, I think the fact that you see him without a shirt not be a coincidence. It was to show that he kept himself in a good shape. But there's something to say, too, about a player that, because he was coaching at the youth level between his retirement and his unretirement yesterday. He coached at different level, did some media things, but he was close to the game and closely involved. And when you have that itch, even though it took 2 years maybe for that itch to be itching so much and he needed to come back, but we'll see. Maybe for me, the reasoning and how he expressed himself in that open letter, why that he doesn't come back, it seems to me that he might actually, maybe just for this year, maybe it actually is to help the Galaxy in a tough situation, because he is in a situation where he can help, which is not always the case.
Yeah, we'll see whether it happens, but I don't know. And Landon's a different cat, as we all know, right? So it's hard to really get inside his head and try and evaluate what he might do, because he doesn't really think like a typical athlete. So you don't really have a template that you can use to judge him on and judge and predict what he might do. I would think that if he's coming back now and he's going to go through the effort to get game shape, because as you said, he's still in beach shape, but there's a hell of a difference between beach shape and game shape, right? So if he's going to put all that effort
between able to run 20, 30 minutes and 90.
Yeah. I still think that, and you're not, it's not like some of these players that are out there in Major League Soccer aren't going to get their backs up a little bit too. I don't care if he's a legend or not. They're going to look at him slide in here and going, look, who the hell do you think you are? Like, you can just sit on your couch for 2 years and step back in and think you're still a superstar out here. He's going to be challenged, even if it's 20 minutes out there.
Yeah.
It's not like the Western Conference foes that he's playing down the stretch are going to, be hugging him and letting him just take the ball in for a miracle goal that we can all see on SportsCenter. That's not how this is going to work, right? So it's going to be challenging for him. I'm not as convinced as other people that he's just going to step back in and be himself. Now that said, I'm not saying that that's completely outside of the realm of possibility either. And if he does come back in and he is successful, he has had that break and he's obviously interested enough in playing to do this, I think that he would probably then extend his contract for another full year. I think, Kevin, we probably should touch on the contract side of things, because I know there are a lot of people that look at this.
There's already 3 DPs in LA. So here was my conspiracy theory yesterday. Like, if you're MLS, how do you make people swallow the pill of having a 4th DP and for the Galaxy? There's probably only one guy that could do that. Yeah, let's bring Donovan back. And then we'll include a 4th DP. And eventually everybody's going to have a 4th DP, no? Isn't that how usually MLS does things? I'm being cynical here, but what's his contract situation?
I suspect first off, I think people have to understand that we always use the term salary cap as a flippant term. It's actually salary budget. So basically whatever his yearly salary figure is going to be prorated for the 2 months left in the season. So we're looking at a quarter of the salary will be what the head is on the budget. So I suspect when you take De Jong out there that you could basically give him exactly what De Jong was going to make for the last quarter of the season, and the numbers will work on a salary cap. In terms of why the LA Galaxy were able to sign him outright without any without any allocation process or anything like that he's essentially just a discovery signing at this point, right? Like, he's out of the league, and as a retired player,
but I think his original contract was still gone through this year, so they still remain his rights or something. That's what I heard yesterday.
Yeah, but even if that weren't the case, he could, like, I used the example of D-Row.
Yeah, okay.
If TFC wanted to sign D-Row today, they could, so long as they put him on their discovery list. I don't think they're going to, for the record, folks. D-Row's not ready to come out of retirement, I don't think. But if they could, like any retired player, if you put him on your discovery list and then sign him, like he's just like anyone in the world that's out there. that's out of contract. You can just approach them at that point. All you have to do is go through the process that any player in the league would come into. Now, with Landon, it's a bit more complicated because he was a U.S. international, but he is retired. So to me, he just came in through a normal discovery process, which is, like I said, any player out of contract anywhere in the world can be put on any team's discovery list. And so long as another team in the league does not have him on the discovery list, the dibs list, if you prefer, then if no one else has him, there's no claim against him, then you can negotiate with them.
And I wouldn't be surprised if you would have been on LA's list anyways.
Yeah,
it seemed to be the type of move that LA would have done. Are you retiring? We'll put you on our 10-man list next to Ronaldo, but in case you decide to unretire.
Yeah, when you can move players you can move players in and out of that list at will, right? Like it's
like a fake list. It's like 10 names on a board, literally, if you're Philly. But that's what the list is.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I mean, people don't understand this process that much because it isn't explained that well by MLS, but essentially that's all it is. It's just they don't want two member clubs negotiating against each other for a single player. So you basically, each team has an internal list that the league keeps that if a team, I should say, then goes to the league and says, I want to sign this player, the league then just goes, just a search on him basically and says, okay, he's not on anyone's list, so go ahead, negotiate with them. But if they go, oh, wait, no, Philly had him on the list, then Philly has his rights at that point, and you have to negotiate something with Philly to figure that out. And I think that probably happens behind the scenes as much as it happens in front of the scenes as much as often, right? Like it's a weird it's a dibs list and it's ridiculous and we all agree with that, but it's how it works. And there's nothing, as much as we all want to have a good LA Galaxy conspiracy theory, I don't necessarily think this one fits the bill, because when I think about it, having covered this league for a long time now, it does actually fit in all of the boxes on as strange as those boxes can be on how a player can come into this league. So I actually don't think that they've manipulated the rules at all. Now, talk to me next year if he does extend as a DP and Robbie Keane decides to stay, and I think Gerard's likely going to move on.
Yeah,
so that would probably be how they do that. But nonetheless, this year I don't think he's probably going to make that much for this half year. I mean, he has money, right? So it's not like he needs a lot of money to do this, and I don't think that's his motivating factor anyway. No, so I suspect you basically, like I said, you take De Jong's salary, you figure out what 1/4 of it is, and then that's what Donovan's getting paid for the last quarter of the year.
Yeah, exactly. Duane, how about we take a small break, and when we come back, we'll do our games of the week.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Normally, Duane, we would start with MLS. We would start with the matchups that have a standings implication. But tomorrow, 7:30 a.m., it's the first Manchester Derby of the year, and it's quite early in the season. Are you ready for it?
No, I'm never ready for it. It's the most miserable 90 minutes of the year. It usually happens once a year, twice a year. So it's the most miserable 180 minutes of the year, I guess. And the year that they were drawn in the League Cup a few years ago was particularly miserable. But no, look, everyone, this is going to get a lot of hype, obviously, because both teams are undefeated heading into the game. You have two new managers there that are both high profile. A lot of new players. Obviously, Aguero's suspension for the elbow there it sort of added a storyline as well, and how City is going to deal with that. But ultimately, yeah, this is way too soon to emotionally be prepared for this damn thing. But here we are, and I'll be up nice and early eating eggs and hoping to get through
it. Arsenal, Southampton, Bournemouth, West Bromwich Albion, Burnley, Hull, Middlesbrough, Crystal Palace, Stoke, Tottenham, West Ham United, Watford, Liverpool, Leicester, and a couple of other great matchup on Sunday, Swansea and Chelsea. So it is pretty much a Manchester Derby driven day tomorrow on that side of the pond.
Yeah, well, Leicester and Liverpool is an interesting matchup as too. It's also the first game at Anfield in which the new stand completely open. So there is some some attention going to be given to that one. Obviously, an historic stadium that it's really a miracle when you look at how and there was a lot of sort of dodgy stuff that happened too, but how they've kind of managed to keep that stadium and build it a little bit bigger, because a lot of people have felt that that's one of the things holding Liverpool back, is they just couldn't drive the same revenues as some of the other clubs, some of the other historical clubs, because their stadium just wouldn't allow it. So to find room for more seats in that place, and they had to sort of displace a few people to do it. But nonetheless, that's kind of an interesting storyline. Although, yeah, it's going to get overshadowed by the Manchester derby for sure.
Speaking of Manchester, Duane, as well, Raheem Sterling voted the EA Sports Player of the Month for August, rewarding him for his great, strong season with Manchester City.
Well, yeah, he's had a great start to the year, and that's kind of been reassuring to a lot of people that were frustrated with him at the end of last season. Last season was, an incredibly frustrating season for Manchester City supporters, because there's just a lot of immense talent there, as we all know. And yes, it's very expensive talent. So if you want to be cynical about it, there's a lot of money spent there. And they really, to only get a League Cup out of it and a semifinal appearance in the Champions League, that never really seemed that inspiring, despite the fact they were in the semifinals of the Champions League. It never looked like they were in danger of winning it. So it wasn't really the best of seasons. And Sterling was absolutely part of that. But the way he started under Pep so far is reassuring, as I said, and this is a very young player that has a lot of growth still, and a lot of future in front of him. So good start to the year, but it's being the player of the month in August is, in baseball they call it derivatively, they call you Mr. April if you're like great when it doesn't quite matter, but not so much when it does. So lots of season left for him to not prove himself. So my cynical nature will continue to go down that road for a while.
Let's move to Major League Soccer. I had the game in front of me, Columbus, Vancouver, Saturday at 6 p.m. But Friday night, there is Friday Night Soccer, Sporting Kansas City versus Houston. In Kansas City, that'll be interesting. Montreal at Philadelphia, so Philly, Montreal tomorrow, 7. New England, New York City FC, Chicago, TFC. Interesting, Duane. Chicago is kind of hot right now, no pun intended. And Toronto is too. So it could be interesting to see if Chicago can play spoilers in the race for the top for Toronto. FC Dallas, Colorado, Portland, RSL, San Jose, Seattle, and Sunday we have the Red Bulls, DC United, and will we see the official return of Landon Donovan Sunday, September 11th versus Orlando? That's the question.
Yeah, it seems a little quick. I don't know. This is what I didn't get about the Donovan stuff, not to go all back on it, because we've talked about it already, is that why when it first came out yesterday I was doubting it is because I would have thought that people would have been reporting that he was training with them already. So the fact that people weren't reporting that suggests to me that he wasn't training with the first team in any real way, which suggests to me that the idea of him playing this weekend is suicidal almost in my mind. I don't care how good of a shape you're in, but basically if you haven't been training with the first team, that would be kind of talk about not setting him up to fail. That would be absolutely in my mind setting him up to fail, but maybe he's superhuman. I don't know. We'll see. Going back to the two, would you say, and I kind of think this, that the Whitecap season is completely on the line this weekend, that if they can't get 3 points against Columbus, that they might as well, fold it up for the year?
Well, maybe, but the fact that they're right now in 9th position in the West, they still have a buffer until the Dynamo in the bottom, but they have already 4 points to the Portland Timbers. If the Timbers get a good result, what is possible at home against RSL, it's going to be a tough game for Portland, but they could get that result. I think if they lost combined with a Portland win, just creates a 7-point gap with the amount of time left in the season, with the state of how things are going right now. First of all, when you lose to Columbus, it's already something special. That combined with a Portland win would be a watershed moment, I think, for Vancouver, where maybe not pack it in, maybe not just disregard the season, but you almost have to win out to have a chance in the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a Whitecaps fan listening, I would suggest that if any other team were in that position, that you would essentially write them off at that point. So it's a vital weekend for them, is the bottom line. As poorly as they've been playing, with a couple wins in a row, they could get back in this. But if you can't get past perhaps the worst team in the league this year, Houston would have an argument in there. Chicago, as you said, has been playing a bit better of late. But if you can't get past them, then I'm just not too sure whether you should be using the word playoffs in any real way. It'd be like, talking about TFC's playoff push in 2013.
Exactly. Just one game that's important to me is Philly Montreal, because they're 4-5 in the standings. Philly is just above Montreal. Montreal had a chance against Orlando midweek, and we all saw how that happened. 4-1 for Orlando to bridge that gap to get a leg in front of Philly before their matchup of the weekend, and that didn't happen. Now they have a chance to get closer to the top. Otherwise, they're going to become a team that battles for survival. They're only 3 points ahead of Orlando in 6th spot. And then 7th is DC United, only 5 points behind. If DC wins in the weekend and Orlando wins in the weekend and Montreal loses once again, Montreal is now a team just battling for a playoff spot. Mauro Biello mentioned that they're not that great. They're not a good team, and they need to stop talking about how their roster is great because, look, they're not top of the East at all, and they're quite far from it as we speak. So they had a chance to prove people wrong on Wednesday. They didn't ace that test. They failed miserably. Tomorrow, they have another chance. Tomorrow, it's another test, this one on the road. So we'll see how Montreal reacts. Because if you take that 1-0 victory they had in Toronto out of the equation, the last 3 games are not that impressive at all.
Well, yeah, and you look at the 401 Derby game there, it's that, the emotion sort of drove them on that day probably a little bit, right? That they were able to step it up and get there. Yeah. But is that ideal that you need that kind of emotional jar to play at your top performance? Because certainly losing 4-1, and we haven't talked about that game, Kevin. So
yeah, exactly. Well, I did a whole show on it, and 4-1, that game, the red card. I actually asked Jason Grice, head coach of Orlando City, about the red card, because yes, the first touch of Rivas was away from the goal. He was setting himself to go around the keeper. So his first touch was around the goal. It was still a clear-cut goal chance, yes, but the rule can be interpreted a different fashion sometimes. So Petrescu on that day called the red card because he felt that Evan Bush impeded him enough to deny him of a clear-cut goal opportunity. That's all well and good, but that's 2 games in a row, because the game before Wednesday was the 401 Derby in Toronto. 2 games in a row, you have red card. Yes, Callum Malice red card was rescinded since then, and he was able to play. And in the future, starting next year, because of FIFA rules have changed, they have changed this year, but because Major League Soccer had already started their season, the famous red card, goalkeeper, and suspension, the penalty, red card, and suspension, the famous 3-way, is gone. It's not in the rules anymore. So at least next year, those things will not happen anymore. But for Evan Bush, for the Montreal Impact, and for Rick Kronberg, it put them all in a situation where, like Kronberg mentioned, it's going to keep him up at night. And Wednesday, that situation kept him up.
Yeah, the double punishment you're talking about, certainly that's a welcome change because, look, the keeper trying to do their job and missing by an inch is not really worthy of a double punishment.
Well, the penalty and the red card, yes, and the suspension, even on the case. So, yeah, so at least one of those will be not in play next year.
Yeah, it's just a penalty in my mind at that point. If a defender does it, that's a different situation in my opinion, but a keeper, it's just kind of par for the course. And unless they're like, clotheslining him or something, then we have a different conversation. That's
yes, exactly. But for that issue as a whole, yeah.
Look, off the world, as you said, if you want to listen to more breakdown on the Orlando game, that's on the network right now. Certainly, I would agree with you that they need to bounce back, and the consistency, which has been not Montreal's friend all this year, they need to find a way to find that down the stretch because I don't know how deep of a playoff run, how much you can take advantage of what is more than likely Drogba's last year you're going to be able to do if you can't find that consistency in a month. Now, we've seen it with Montreal last year, and in an even more extreme case with Portland last year, how even this late you can turn a season around, but it's really got to start with Philly.
No, and we mentioned all season where teams had games in hand and were not at the right place in the standing, and Philly had a great start of the season. The standing in the Eastern Conference right now is a very good, if not the best indication. Every team is exactly where they should be of how they played this year. And it's kind of weird to say, but Montreal is fifth in the East the way they played this year. Shouldn't be first. They should be second. And sometimes the standings were skewed because of the schedule, because of teams play more games. And Montreal had a better result back then. But every team like the Red Bulls, who had a disastrous start, we all knew they were better than that. And cream rises to the top. Right now, if I look at the Eastern Conference, I do believe New York City FC is the best team in the conference, but not a lot above the Red Bulls. And the Red Bulls are a lot better than Toronto. It's actually very indicative of the forces in the Eastern Conference right now.
Should I point out that the most points per game is TFC?
Yes, you can. You can.
They're pretty much in a virtual tie, the top three teams in the East right now. But yeah, we'll see what happens down the stretch. And I don't think anyone would. The Red Bulls, as I have consistently said all year, are to me the best team in the East. However, I don't think anyone. Well, I mean, the people in Toronto and people outside of Toronto, for that matter, didn't maybe think TFC. There are a lot of doubters for TFC because of the history, but no one saw NYCFC up there, obviously. But
that's an indictment of how great of a job Patrick Vieira is doing. In a low-profile type of, he's in the biggest market and he's doing it in a low-profile way where results speaks for themselves.
He's going to be. He's coach of the year if they win the East. He's got to be.
He has to be. He has to be. Yeah.
We had that conversation a couple weeks ago, and we'll probably revisit our quarter season stuff in next week. But yeah, no, right now we'll see what happens down the stretch. But certainly, you got to applaud that, especially when he took over from Christ, and everyone assumed that Christ was the chosen one, so to speak.
That's an easy one. Jason Christ, just add a T at the end.
Yeah, look, we're running near the end here, but you mentioned about the playoff push in Montreal and all that. I mean, we talk about the playoffs all the time in this league, obviously, because it's a playoff league. But there's making the playoffs, and then there's
making the playoff like the Impact in 2014 or Toronto in 2015, or there's making the playoff like having a win in the playoff like last year.
Yeah, and I think finishing above. You first off, you want to finish top two, and if you can't finish top two, then you definitely want to finish top four. Those 5-6 playing the road playing games, that's a tough ask for any team out there. And you have a ball in the lottery, but it's a very tiny ball.
You have one instead of like five.
That's stuck kind of in the corner of the thing as it goes around when they try and pull the ball out.
And you see it in the corner. You damn well know you're not going to win, but you're still part of the dance, right?
Yeah, so that it's obviously if the choice is between finishing 6th and 7th, you're going to choose 6th, but it's a very precarious kind of position to be in as TFC fans, as Montreal fans from a couple of years ago would well know, Kevin. All right, that's probably going to be it for today. What do you think?
Absolutely. Next week we are live all week long, 11 a.m. Monday to Friday. We might have the same setup audio-wise as today for majority of the week. It's our B setup, but don't get us wrong. We will be live from Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. And until then, have a great soccer.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
There we go.
More than 1% of my battery went down every minute.
You can
I
plug
started
your phone,
at 70. I'm at 15 now.
You can plug your phone.
Yeah, Elizabeth got home from Vancouver over the red eye, so she's sleeping in the bedroom. If I have to do this next week, I'll do it with the phone plugged in the bedroom.
Cool. All right.
We'll talk then. Bye.